I want to establish a 10 megahertz reference signal that's available to me in the shop here. I have a couple of items that have the ability to take a 10 megahertz reference in rather than use the internal time base. So I bought this GPS disciplined oscillator. It's a PPL GP SDO, GPS disciplined, and it's a BG7 TBL brand. I have no intention of hooking up to the RS-232. That would give me information like the number of satellites and maybe some other internal stuff. And I have no intention of hooking up to 1 pulse per second. But I do want to use this 10 megahertz output. So I'm looking at it on the spectrum analyzer, and you see it's outputting about 13.5 dBm, with no evidence of second or third harmonics. Maybe a little bit right there. But it's certainly way down. Now I intend to use a distribution amplifier, and this is a distribution amplifier. It has an input here, an amplifier here, and it used to have 6 outputs here. I've disconnected this or disabled this BNC connector and have connected it to the front. The front panel was blind except for a power light. Now this is a video distribution amplifier, so all the output resistors are 75 ohms. And the input is a 75 ohm. I'm hoping that that doesn't do anything to the signal. Now this is an all steel case. Very nice fit here. The front and rear panels are inserted into grooves in all 4 sides. So this should be fairly RF tight. Now this distribution amplifier is an Extron CVDA6 composite video distribution amplifier. Some instructions on the back. I don't care about. What I want to do is hook up the 10 megahertz standard and then see if we got any distortion or if the amplitude changes drastically. So I've hooked the output from the oscillator to the input, and I've taken one of the outputs and connected it to the spectrum analyzer. There you can see the output signal. It's virtually identical as far as the 10 megahertz output, but we do see a spur there on the third harmonic at 30 megahertz. Just a teeny bump at the second harmonic and then nothing else. So I'm thinking that this distribution amplifier should be fairly good for distributing 10 megahertz to at least 6 places. It has 6 outputs. Now, if we look at this, you can see it has 2 LEDs. The green one is lighted, the red one is not. That means we should be getting 10 megahertz of GPS disciplined frequency out here. If I unplug it, and this is a GPS antenna, looks something like this. If I unplug it, of course both lights go off. Now I'll plug it back in and power it back up. You see the red light has come on and the power light is blinking. So this is not a guaranteed output. I mean, if you look at the spectrum analyzer, it's putting out 10 megahertz, but it's not controlled by the GPS signal yet. So what's happening now is it's accumulating satellites, probably 3, 4, maybe 10. And there's a phase lock loop that has a time constant. And after a couple of hours, the red light will go out. One thing I want to do is cap all these unused outputs to minimize on RF, well, specifically to minimize 10 megahertz pollution here in the shop. And these are little 50 ohm quarter watt BNCs from W5SWL. And I'm looking at the spectrum analyzer. I didn't set the camera up, but the output signal is not changing as I had these. So the distribution amplifier doesn't care if these terminations are in place. Actually, as I add these terminators, I begin to get some harmonics. Second, third, and fourth harmonics are now appearing. So here's the output with none of the terminations in place. And you see I can't see anything at the second harmonic. I'm going to put these terminators back on. One, two, three. You see a little bit is becoming visible of the second harmonic at 20 megahertz. And the last one, which will make 5 terminations, which would be equivalent to every output feeding a device, right? And you see, the second harmonic appeared. You see there's a little bouncing there. So increasing terminations on this thing resulted in some increased harmonic activity, which is interesting. Before I put this distribution amplifier to bed, I thought I would look at the frequency response just out of curiosity. I'll turn the tracking generator on. I'm inputting 0 dBm. And I'm outputting 0 dBm. It begins to fall off above 40 megahertz. I'll expand the frequency range. So let's make it 150. So there we can see it's pretty flat to 40 megahertz for what it's worth. So here's the oscillator and distribution amplifier tucked under my shelf. Actually, it's holding the RCA in place. And then on my shop distribution panel, I have a 10 megahertz output. And there it is on the spectrum analyzer. And when it's not in use, I'll cap the 10 megahertz outlet with a terminated BNC cap.